presentation, which is going to be held by Mr. Iskandar Sattibaev. Enjoy.
Hope there will be a lot to enjoy. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Right. There are so few people, you could hear me even without the microphone. However, less people, less stress, right? More fun. I'm Iskandar Sattibaev. I teach English at Specialized School number 1. And yes. So, please raise your hands if you know who this is on the monitor. I don't mean the gentleman who gave speech in the morning. I mean the image on the monitor. Do you see the picture? Yeah. So, who is this? Well, this is the reason I'm doing a research on this person. I'm going to talk about him extensively in my presentation, and I will explain to you why it is important to learn about this person. So, this is Robert Burns, and my today's presentation is called Introducing Robert Burns. And again, I'm Iskandar Sattibaev, and in my presentation today, I'm going to cover a few points. First, introduction. Second, linguistic significance. Oops, I thought it was synchronized. Let me entertain you with a joke, okay? As my presentation is concerned with Scotland, it will be about Scotland. One day, Angel Gabriel looked at Scotland, and he saw that God gave the Scots wide fields. God gave Scots lots of wheat, lots of rivers, beautiful mountains, green nature, everything. And Gabriel looked at Scotland and he was amazed, and he asked God, God, aren't you a bit too kind to the Scots? And God said, now wait until what kind of neighbors I will give the Scots. Well, it was a joke. Did you get it? It is a Scottish joke. Historically, the Scots don't like the English. There is even a motto in Scotland, like keep Scotland clean, throw your rubbish in England. Right. Shall we? Okay. I'm sorry for all the technicalities. That's not my fault, so whatever. The person, so yes, today my topic is called Introducing Robert Burns. And why do we need to introduce Robert Burns? Because at the very beginning, some of you acknowledged that you don't know him, therefore we need to introduce him. And my today's presentation includes a few points. First is, of course, introduction, then linguistic significance, thematic universalities, and translation challenges. So these are the aspects which are related to my research. By the way, the information which I am about to share with you is based on my findings on my PhD research, which I am conducting under the supervision of Dr. Egam Nazarova. So hopefully next year, this time, I will be Dr. Sattibaev, not just Mr. Sattibaev. Okay, so Robert Burns is or was an outstanding Scottish poet. He's like Pushkin for the Scots because of his influence, because of his impact, and because of his heritage. And he lived, you can see, a very short life of only about 30-something. So at my age, he was already dead, right? And he lived mainly in Scotland, but when he gained some popularity as a poet, he moved to London, where he spent some years creating poems and publishing books. And a few of the most popular works by Robert Burns are Auld Lang Syne, which in English is like Old Long Song, and Tam O'Shanter. These are just a few examples. So now, let's look. Can you guess who this poem is written by. The rose of all the world is not for me. I want for my part only the little white rose of Scotland that smells sharp and sweet and breaks the heart. And the translation is mine. All the translations I will provide today are mine. Dünya çiçekleri bari begona. Menga yolg'iz o'zi erur kifoya. Men uchun diyorim gul yagona. Iforlari jon oluvchi nihoyat. And from this poem, you can see how the author loves his country, right? It is full of love, full of longing, and full of passion to his motherland. And Robert Burns wrote in this spirit, but this is not Robert Burns. This is another poet. This is Hugh McDiarmid. So he is, well, he can be considered our, how can I say? How do we say that? The person who lived in the same time with us. Yes, but in English. Yeah, contemporary, yes. But he died long before I was born. So he was the poet of the 20th century. But what we can see from the poem is the wonderful passion. And I personally believe that he got this from this person. Now this is Robert Burns. And this is the beginning of his 16-line famous poem called The Red Rose. And this was the very first piece which I translated into Uzbek. So I'll try to read it to you. Oh, my love's like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love's like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. Mening sevgim qizil atirgul, yoz oyda ochilgan toza. Mening sevgim yoqimli kuydir, totli ohanglari ovoza. Do you like the translation? Yeah. Right, I did it. So, what I want to say that, judging from his works, Robert Burns has a lot to offer us. So, it must be, or it is a must, or it is a should for the English philologists or linguists or translation to theorists to study his works. So, linguistic significance of Robert Burns' works. As a philologist or as a pedagogue who teaches English, I believe you should be interested in the pieces of English literature. So while studying the works of Robert Burns, we should firstly pay attention to the linguistic significance. So what kind of linguistic significances are there? So first of all is the bilingual literary style. Originally, Robert Burns is Scottish, and although Scotland and England are generally considered to be one country, Great Britain or the United Kingdom, these are two different nations. And one of the questions which the Scots hate most is like, how are you different from the English? They consider themselves a totally different race. But as Scotland was under the domination of England, lots of Scotland was influenced by England, and of course the English language is still influencing Scottish literature. So Robert Burns also used bilingual style, and when you read his poems you can find the elements of both the English language and the Scots. And in this poem I have highlighted with bold letters the Scottish words, right? So now I'll try to read it aloud again. The translation is mine. The cheer for supper done with serious face. They round the Engel form a circle wide. The sire turns her with patriarchal grace. The bigger her Bible ends his father's pride. Even a person with advanced English may say, what is this? Right? Because of these elements present from the Scottish language. So in translation it sounds like Quvnoq tushlik bitta jiddiy ravishda. O'choq atrofida davra tuzishdi. Ota boqdi nigohida salobat, olib Injil otasidan omonat. So this is just the beginning of a poem which continues, but for the presentation's sake, I just chose the first part. And of course, while studying Robert Burns' poetic work, the scholar or whoever studies his works will have to deal with this bilingual nature, and he may witness the beautiful fusion of the Scottish language and the English language, and I think that it will contribute volumes to the knowledge and the intellectual luggage of that scholar. When you read Robert Burns' poems in original, most of times you need the English translation. For example, when I was translating this poem, I'm frank with you, I just referred to the version in Norman English. Because again, even if you have 9.0 in IELTS, it's quite possible that you are not very familiar with the Scottish English. So Robert Burns stands out among the British poets with the extensive use of his mother tongue, his native vernacular, and he was never shy. He did not try to imitate or mimic the English language in order to be more popular. However, his vernacular made him popular. Now, this is one of the most famous poems. It has jolly nature, and it is called To the Mouse. So this poem addresses a mouse, right? Now, slick it cowering timorous beastie, water panics in thy breastie, thou needna start away a hasty, we bickering brattle, what be laith to rin and chase thee, we murdering paddle. In Uzbek, it sounds like Jajji silliq qo'rqoq mahluq, aytgin joning halak nechuk, shoshaverma hojati yo'q, yugurasan sen misli o'q, aslo quvmoq emasman, senga zarar bermasman. So here, Robert Burns addresses the mouse and describes in a poetic language the qualities of a mouse in such a way that one can't help being amused and amazed at his poetical talent and the talent of the translator as well, right?
We can see some old English words though here.
Yes, and all these short forms are also used extensively. So these are the vernacular peculiarities of Robert Burns. Now, cultural identity. Again, by culture we mean, well, actually culture is one of the most contradictory concepts which has ever existed. And even very outstanding anthropologists and sociologists have hard time describing what culture is. But very briefly, I would say that culture is who we are. And especially when one nation is influenced by another nation, it is a must for a person to preserve his or her cultural identity. And this is very essential in terms of Uzbekistan as well, because nowadays, especially in the 21st century, for example, if in the 20th century we were mostly influenced by the Russian culture, the Russian civilization, the Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah, in the 21st century we have access to the all global processes. And nowadays it has become very easy to travel globally, and the internet has erased most of the borders, so now we have full exchange with other countries. And in this situation, it is very important to preserve one's cultural identity. And Robert Burns, despite being or becoming popular in England, he was always for preserving his Scottish identity. And one of the features of Scottish identity was egalitarianism. When there are no lords, when there are no dukes, where everyone is equal. So he wrote and he advocated social justice and equality. So from the point of view of cultural identity, Robert Burns is very important for us, because we are, and I'm saying are with all capital letters, we are the nation who need to define and who need to stand for our national identity today, because we have too many challenges which are facing us all the time, so we must be strong enough to stand against them. And of course, we could extract some inspiration from this poet. Now, thematic universality of Burns' works. So thematic universality means that this poet uses such themes in his poets which are universally understandable. Like no matter what nation you belong to or no matter what background you have, his ideas, his feelings still ring bells with you. So and let's talk about the aspects of thematic universality. So first of all, it is human emotions. Like everybody cries, right? Everybody laughs. Everybody feels sad. Everybody feels happy. Everybody is capable of love. Everybody is capable of hatred, etc. So Robert Burns' poems do address this feature of human emotions. And as I have already read the translation, when you hear this poem, you can't help admiring, right? The way he describes his love as something bright, because he mentions June, which is the brightest part of the year, and he compares his love to the red rose, which shows his like bleeding heart full of love to his lover, etc., etc. So even sentimentally, Robert Burns' poems are capable of taking you away to other dimensions, let's say so. So even from this perspective, studying Robert Burns' poems is particularly interesting. And of course, social equality, as I have said. So he says, the rank is but the guinea stamp, the man's the gold for at that. Rütbe pul üstüde bir tamga halas. İnsan zatı erur hakiki olmaz. So what it means is that, for example, someone is a general, someone is a professor, someone is like world champion, etc., right? But all these things are just the stamps, or all these things are the labels which were invented by human beings. But the very gem, which is the essence or the quintessence of humanity, is just being a human. And of course, when we value just the fact that we are human beings, it teaches us how to be humble, and it teaches us the fact that everybody in this world is equal. And of course, again, we learn about this from this poet's works. Next point is nature and simplicity. Just for this presentation's sake, again, I chose the short extracts from his works. However, when you read Robert Burns' works more extensively, there are lots of poems which are about nature, about plants, about mountains, water, wind, landscape, animals, etc. And everything comprises this nature. For example, if you are very well familiar with the Russian literature, you might have heard about Sergei Yesenin or Pushkin, most definitely, and they are very famous for their picturesque description of the Russian nature, right? Osen, what? Para, Acheravanya, something like that, right? So Robert Burns never fails to describe the full beauty of the Scottish nature. And by simplicity, I mean that, like, what poet addresses a mouse, right? When we think about a poet, we think about the person who writes like philosophical poems, love, hate, like emotions, etc. But Robert Burns keeps it down to the earth, right? He's just another guy, you know? He's not someone in heaven who has this heavenly talent. Well, he has heavenly talent, but he acts as if he is just another guy. And we can follow this simplicity in his works when he addresses a mouse, such an insignificant creature. Or another important example is he has an ode to haggis. Do you know what haggis is? Haggis is like Uzbek hasp. they take lamb intestines and they stuff it with different things from the lamb itself. So it may be meat and other things, right? So they call it haggis. It's a national food of the Scots. So Robert Burns has an ode, Bagışlav, to haggis. Can you imagine an Uzbek poet who wrote about hasp, right? Or qazi, right? So from this point of view, Robert Burns' works are full of nature, fresh breath, and of course simplicity, and one can't help enjoying this beauty. Right. Next comes translation challenges. Of course, you have seen that his works are not an easy piece, right? Especially because of his Scottish dialect, because of his extensive use of native vernacular, and of course, any translator who dares to translate his works into his mother tongue will have to face lots of challenges. Now let me just mention a few. So first is the vernacular. And I have already given you the translation, and when you read the Uzbek version, of course you can see that, let's just return to the point. Right. Did we pass it? Yeah. So in my translation, I used Uzbek literary words. However, Robert Burns did not. He used his, he did not use the literary English language. He used his Scottish dialect, right? So here the challenge or the question is, how correct am I? Translating his works into Uzbek using Uzbek literary words. And if I want my translations to be understood by everybody in Uzbekistan, because you know that in Uzbekistan as well, people speak lots of different dialects, right? I personally believe that I have to use the Uzbek literary language. But one of my guesses so far, I haven't used in practice, maybe I might refer to some concepts used by Robert Burns using like Andijan dialect. Because again, he is using his own vernacular, so I might try to use my vernacular, which is a little bit different from the literary language, to make this translation. Would it be equivalent, right? So to find the equivalence in the translation. But I'm using just the phrases describing possibility, because I'm not sure yet, because I'm in the process of the research. So maybe in future I will be able to share better solutions. So next point is rhythm and poetic structure, right? You know that, for example, in Uzbekistan we are accustomed to rubai, right, to ghazal, things like that, and they have their different metrics. And in English literature they have totally different structures. And again, this is of course not by Robert Burns. This is the poem which I read at the very beginning by Hugh MacDiarmid, right? Which is also a beautiful poem. Just visually compare. Just look at the size of the lines. Look at the number of the syllables on each line. So you can say that, you can see that they do not correspond. So, the rose of all the world is not for me. Dünya çiçekleri bari begane. Where is the rose? Yeah, but it's not the rose, right? But imagine my writing, Dünya atırgülleri bari mengi begane. It wouldn't make much sense, would it? Or, only the little white rose of Scotland. Men üçün Şotlandiyanın gülü yagane. Right? So, we have to sacrifice. We can't help it, because otherwise it would not be a poetic translation. It would be just, I don't know, like scientific reference, like this word means that and this word means that. But when you want to share the emotions of the writers, right? So what is the intention of the poet here? It's that he loves Scotland so much that one flower, one single rose is able to break his heart with its beauty. And I do hope that my translation, well, I can't say it's as good as the English version, but it still is able to convey the feeling, right? So you are professional philologists. Do my words make sense? Right? Thank you very much. And of course, poet's identity, right? You know this proverb, like, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are, right? The same works with the poet. I mean, show me your poems and I will tell you how deeply you are in love, right? Or how much you hate someone, things like that. So I think, and I'm convinced, that Robert Burns is the poet whose Scottishness just shines. I had a chance to study literature in Edinburgh, in hometown of Robert Burns in Scotland, and I have had lots of contact with his works. And I do urge you from today, I mean, if you do that, that will be my contribution to the academia, let's say. So just to have a look at his works. And you will see that being who you are is cool. For example, being a person who you are, belonging to the nation you belong to, having the relatives you have, and living where you live is cool. Of course, as a person, we strive for better, right? We want to have more interesting friends, we want to live in a more beautiful house, but there are things which we can't help having, right? And sometimes some people are unhappy about that. It may be your mother tongue, right? It may be, I don't know, the way you look. But when you read Robert Burns, he reassures you and says, man, this is my identity and I'm happy about that. So cool. And of course, ta-da! Yes, so these were the things which I wanted to share with you. I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, instead of having a full hall of people not paying attention, it's much better to share your opinions with a few people who like what you speak about. So if you have any questions, by the way, these are my contact details just in case. My email, I rarely check my email, but my phone is always on. So I have a telegram on this number just in case. And if you have any questions about Robert Burns, about English literature, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. I have a word to say about his research. Mr. Sattibaev, thanks for sharing your research findings. It's been so super informative. His mentor, I have to state the fact that he is just on the initial stage of his practical section for his dissertation, and he's already rocking that. And there are more to come. There are a lot to come. And I have to confess the fact that it's something really complicated. The process is really complicated. And what stands me most about his approach to his research is he is translating all of the poems by himself on his own with his individual poetic approach, which was something impossible for me. So he's making a world of difference. And I hope it's going to be an impactful contribution, a positive contribution to the enhancement of academia. All of the works on translation studies and contrastive literary criticism have been conducted on the example of ready-made translations. So he's not taking any ready-made translations, especially for Robert Burns, and his dialectal use of Scottish language. He's trying, and I hope you're going to see really brilliant research findings soon, hopefully.
Thank you very much.